Oh my, it's us again. And you. Together we learn from the Bible, the most important book of your life. And to learn some of these Old Testament stories and chapters is one of the finest things that you can do for yourself. Many lessons, small group, Sunday school, and even from the pulpit, lessons that last us a lifetime. So now let's hear a little more from the book of Exodus. This time it's chapter 17. And we have several questions. The first, the children of Israel move on now, and to what place?
It's called Rephidim.
Rephidim. I don't know those names again. I guess it was all right with them. What was the problem here?
Well, no water.
The usual.
Yeah. Oh no.
When they had water, it was because of the big rain at a certain season, and then it flowed and was gone. So out here in this desert, a lot of crooks and crevices, no water again. And you know that gets serious in a hurry. So you can kind of understand the situation. So what happens? Next question. The people murmured against Moses, and what were they about to do?
They were about to stone him to death. It was they blamed him.
Why do humans react so severely and quickly, harshly? There's something inside of us that seems to want to boil over. And you know, this happens to almost any of us, and no wonder the New Testament says, be slow to speak, quick to hear, and slow to wrath. My, oh my, what a lesson to take to heart. We're impatient people. Maybe that's is what keeps us going and keeps us working hard and so on. But I see on and on how with myself and with other people, you have to tell yourself now, be patient, wait on the Lord, and just plain learn to wait. There's going to be another day. Yeah, they're going to stone Moses. So what happens when you stone your leader? You're on your own. I hear they kind of do that to preachers too. They did it to Paul, and they tried to stammy a good, righteous spokesman of God. What did they do to Jeremiah? In the well. What did they do to John the Baptist? Oh, you know. What did God tell Moses to do?
Oh, he said, Moses, we got to fix this. I want you to take the elders and take your rod and smite the mountain. We've got to get them some water.
Yeah. I used to put this in with the striking the stone, but this is the first case of striking. He smote the mount, and out of the mount came the water. Well, isn't that something? God can bring water out of a dried up, just laying there stone or mountain. He didn't melt the mountain, snow on the mountain, it just plain started. What did they get?
Water.
Water. Look. It wasn't whiskey. It wasn't beer. It wasn't a spike in your drink. It was just plain water. What did Moses accuse the children of Israel of doing?
Well, he accused them of tempting the Lord because he says, "Is the Lord among us or not?" The people said.
Yeah.
They were grumping again.
I think this is a very important lesson and thought to think about. As I hear people complain and blame God, same thing. Is the Lord among us or isn't He? Now there's times that it seems like He left the room.
Can you blame him?
I think I'd walk out and stay out, even if it's snowing outside. But someone has said, when it's testing time, the teacher is completely quiet. So, when we go through our test times, and there's many of them, it might just be that God is quiet, listening to see how we will do, whether we'll cheat, whether we'll try hard, whether we will stay happy. So it's something to think about. You kind of put the B on God when you act the way you do and all that complaining. Just realize, I think it's very true that when we complain and murmur, we reflect on God. We're telling everyone around us that God can't take care of us.
Yeah, we don't trust him.
Well, what do you think when, I've heard this before more than once, if children go around the community begging for something to eat with the neighbors or whatever, what does that do? That reflects on mom and dad. Now maybe some parents aren't taking care of the children, but for the most part, if they're taking care of them and are, children shouldn't be going around asking for something because that reflects on mom and dad. And when we complain about God, it reflects on Him. A good something to think about. What warred against them here at Rephidim?
A group of people called, well, and their leader's name was Amalek.
The Amalekites.
Yeah.
Yes. What orders did Moses give Joshua?
He says, I want you to choose some men and you go up there and fight him.
Yes. What did Moses do?
Well, Moses and Aaron and Hur went to the top of the mountain and Moses held out his rod.
Yeah, what happened?
Well, as long as Moses held out his rod, they won. But his arms got tired, and when they went down, they lost.
Yeah.
So,
How did they solve this problem?
well, Moses sat down on a rock, and Aaron and Hur each got on each side and held up each arm.
Right. How long did they do this?
Until the sun went down, a long time.
Now, you know, you would think that God would just cream Amalek's dream right off and get over with. But as we've seen before, God expects of us and demands of us that we do something ourselves. He just does not hand it to us. Just like you just don't hand things to you. Your children, I mean. I remember when such a youngster, and we didn't have many things back in the 30s and 40s, especially candies. Now, sometimes when Dad would go to town, he'd bring back a sack of lemon drops. How often, how much do you think we got of those lemon drops? We got one today. Maybe one tomorrow, or maybe one next week. That had to last. And that's the way it was. And I guess I don't regret that, though. You know, it seems like that we just hand about anything to the children today, pardon the thought. But when we don't get all we would like to have, when we would like to have it, don't you suppose that does something good for us and the patience we're supposed to have? Well, when you read these Old Testament books and stories, you fasten on to the mind and thinking of God. And if you pick up on that, you'll learn how you need to have the mind of God and the mind of Christ. Good thought. How long? Yeah, till the sun went down. Because of this, what did God have written in a book?
That he would utterly put out of remembrance Amalek.
Amalek. And the last question, who was Amalek?
He was the grandson of Esau.
How about that?
Evidently that meant something.
Of course. So Joshua discomfited Amalek, verse 3 of 17, or verse 13 of 17, and his people with the edge of the sword. And the Lord said unto Moses, write this for a memorial in a book. So they had pencil and paper, so to speak, back then. And they put it down. And he said, rehearse it in the ears of Joshua, for I will utterly put out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. Verse 16, for he said, because the Lord has sworn that the Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation. So from here on out, because Amalek and his people, offspring, collaborators, because they worked against the people of God, God said, I'm going to stomp them out. Now, who's Amalek?
Grandson of Esau.
Grandson of Esau. Remember that old story?
Yeah.
How Esau and Jacob were at odds one with the other? Now, when Jacob came back from Haran and met Esau, they seemed to patch up things. And they both went their way. Jacob, we travel his lifetime, and Esau settled in Edom, which is just south of the promised land there, a lot of mountains. But God said, you're going to be brought down. Because of what? You fought against my people. And not only did you do that, you fought against the lame, the sick, the incapable. And that's a no-no with God. And you know, 400 or 500 years later, who went against the Amalekites big time? King Saul. And God gave instructions then at that time. Now remember this, 400 or 500 years later. I want you to wipe them out entirely. What did Saul do? He saved animals. He saved the king. He didn't wipe them all out. Saul got in trouble because of that, and that was the very, well, pretty much the beginning of the end for him. So when people work against God's people, they get themselves in Dutch with God. And I've seen times in church or in church life people make their moves against the spiritual ones, and things don't turn out too great. I would hesitate to go against God's man, God's people, God's church. And I think this is beginning to happen in our own nation. People who have fought Christianity are going to pay a price. And if they don't pay it in this life, they certainly will pay it at judgment. Now, even though, let me tell you this a little bit, even though Esau and Jacob made up when they met there coming from Haran, something still carried on. Because here a grandson, Amalek, so many, many years later, is acting like Esau and fighting and harming Jacob's offspring, like Esau was so against Jacob. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Even though there seemed to be a peace treaty, years later the disposition went down the family bloodline, and the Amalekites were known for rabble-rousing, attacking others. They did it with King David. They did it with others. So the disposition went on, and what am I saying? The disposition that we display in our lifetime is going to go on through our children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and it's up to us to make sure it's a good disposition. And that's another great big reason for Bible, for church, for Jesus, and everything that goes with it in a peacemaking way. Blessed are the peacemakers, because something good's going to come their way. Good Bible lesson, folks. I hope you can appreciate it, and I know you will. So, live for Jesus, learn these lessons, and help your offspring to follow in your steps. Is that it? Okay, see you next time.